Chapter 11-15. After listening to Lu Sanjin, Chu Xiu could imagine how complicated the situation of the entire southern wilderness was, but he was not worried. Chu Xiu did not go there to share the burden of Imperial Sky Pavilion. He mainly went to find Ting Chunyu and think about how he should enter High Heaven sect and meet Dugu Weiwei. Imperial Sky Pavilion did things swiftly and decisively. The next day, the news had already reached Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang directly announced this matter in front of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's senior executives. After that, all the senior executives of Imperial Sky Pavilion looked at each other, not knowing what the old pavilion master meant. If it was under normal circumstances, everyone would definitely object to letting Chu Xiu be a county governor. This was not just a matter of trust, but also involved things such as strength, qualifications, and so on. Giving this position to an honored guest who had just joined Imperial Sky Pavilion and had reached the true fire spirit refinement realm was simply a joke. However, everyone knew that Jianghu County was a hot potato, and no one wanted to go there. Therefore, after the death of the previous county governor, Li Wuxiang personally went to the southern wilderness and killed a lot of people. Although it could be considered as revenge, he did not choose the position of the next county governor. Now, throwing an honored guest like Chu Xiu over there seemed to be a bit of a trap. Zhong Qiushui also frowned and could not figure it out. At this time, Li Wuxiang turned his head to Zhong Qiushui and asked, "Deputy Pavilion Master, do you have any doubts?" Zhong Qiushui shook his head and said lightly, "No, I agree." Chu Xiu was someone Lu Sanjin had brought along, and Lu Sanjin was the old pavilion master's man. He also relied on Li Wuxiang when he did things, so no matter how one looked at it, he and Chu Xiu did not seem to be on the same side. At this time, if Li Wuxiang and others were to send Chu Xiu to Jianghu County to be the county governor, then if Li Wuxiang and others had good intentions, it would be a trap for their own people. He could not be bothered to care. If Li Wuxiang and the others were to play dirty tricks with Chu Xiu, then when Chu Xiu was really miserably cheated, he might be able to pull him to his side. So no matter what, he had no reason to object. Seeing that nobody objected, Li Wuxiang made a decision and said, "All right then, it's decided. After Chu Xiu, he'll be the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Jianghu County's county governor." After saying that, Li Wuxiang called Chu Xiu over alone and gave him some words of encouragement, but they were all just polite words. Li Wuxiang didn't know what to say. From his point of view, the old pavilion master's move seemed to be a scam. However, he didn't know why Chu Xiu would agree to it. Therefore, he could only say some official words to encourage Chu Xiu. In the end, Li Wuxiang passed a token to Chu Xiu and said, "This is the Imperial Sky Pavilion's secret order. At the same time, it represents your identity as the county governor. I've already informed the local cultivators of the Imperial Sky Pavilion in Jianghu County about your resignation. You can also bring some cultivators over to the headquarters. There might not be enough cultivators there." Li Wuxiang was being tactful when he said this. Not only were there not enough cultivators in Jianghu County, but they were also missing more than half of them. During the barbarian riot previously, Jianghu County had already lost a portion of their people. When the Jianghu County's Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators saw that this place was dangerous, they used all sorts of connections to transfer them back to the headquarters or other counties. In the end, there were only a few people left. Chu Xiu asked, "Is there anyone who's willing to go?" Although Li Wuxiang didn't say it explicitly, Chu Xiu understood what he meant. Li Wuxiang's expression was slightly awkward. He thought about it and said, "Let Lu Sanjin help you pick a few people. It's the sect's order. Even if they don't want to go, they have to go." Lu Sanjin was considered reliable. Li Wuxiang asked him to pick people, so he chose 2 true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators from the Imperial Sky Pavilion's core forces and over 10 real pellet realm cultivators to follow Chu Xiu. These people belonged to Li Wuxiang, the pavilion master. Although the number of people was a little shabby, and they were a little unwilling, they could only grit their teeth and accept the order from the higher-ups. Before leaving, Lu Sanjin called everyone over. He pointed at a tall and sturdy middle-aged man and said, "This is Qin Zhong. He used to guard the Imperial Sky Pavilion for over 50 years. He then pointed at a slightly older old man and said, "This is old Mr. Su Fengshan. He used to follow 6 county governors and is very experienced in handling the affairs of the underworld." Chu Xiu nodded. He could tell from the 2 people that Lu Sanjin had chosen that he was indeed attentive. Although Qin Zhong was a gatekeeper, in reality, how could a person who could guard a top sect like the Imperial Sky Pavilion be an ordinary person? He must be someone with extraordinary looks and strength. This Qin Zhong looked like a piece of good material for a hired thug. As for Su Fengshan, he was clearly an experienced old man in the underworld. Perhaps Lu Sanjin was afraid that Chu Xiu did not have the experience to manage his subordinates and was afraid that he would not be able to control them, so he sent Su Fengshan. The 2 of them cupped their hands at Chu Xiu and greeted, "Greetings, young Master Chu." Although their attitude was respectful, there was some dissatisfaction in their tone. It was normal when one thought about it. Jianghu County was a fire pit, and whoever went there would be unlucky. They did not want to go in the first place, but now they were forced to jump into the fire pit with Chu Xiu. It would be strange if they were happy. Chu Xiu did not care about those things. He cupped his hands at Lu Sanjin and said, "Brother Lu, I'll take my leave then." Lu Sanjin nodded and said, "Brother Chu, have a safe journey. I wish you success." After leading these people on their journey, Chu Xiu immediately rushed to Jianghu County at the fastest speed possible. Along the way, Qin Zhong and Su Fengshan were not in the mood to talk to Chu Xiu because they were not in a good mood. However, Chu Xiu could not be bothered to talk to them either. He only cared about the journey, which made Qin Zhong and Su Fengshan feel a little uneasy. When it was time to rest at night, Qin Zhong quietly walked to Su Fengshan's side and secretly transmitted his voice, "Elder Su, what do you think this kid is doing? Is it because the higher-ups think highly of him and want him to go to Jianghu County, or is it because someone doesn't like him and wants him to go there?" Su Fengshan scratched his head and said, "This old man can't see it clearly now. Right now, Jianghu County is very chaotic. Everyone knows this. Even heaven and earth mystic realm experts are not willing to go there, let alone others. However, this young Master Chu is said to be the successor of a prime venerable, so his status is naturally noble. There's no reason for the higher-ups to trick a prime venerable successor. We are all personally chosen by Elder Lu. Judging from his attitude, it doesn't seem like he's being targeted. Strange, really strange." Qin Zhong frowned and said, "Then what should we do? Since we've been singled out to jump into the fire pit, we should have a plan. But look at him, he hasn't even said a word along the way. What is he thinking? He doesn't even know what's going on. I heard that these prime venerable successors have been cultivating in the mountains and forests since they were young. Have their brains gone bad from cultivating?" Su Fengshan said in a low voice, "Be careful with your words. This young master is very close to Elder Lu and is also the successor of a prime venerable. He even defeated High Heaven Sect's Xianyuan Wushuang. His strength and status are not something we can compare with. I know you're a little unhappy about going to Jianghu County, but you should be careful with your words. Don't offend this young Master Chu." Qin Zhong nodded. Although he didn't seem to mind, he still remembered Su Fengshan's advice. Since Chu Xiu wasn't going to say anything, he could only let them speak first. Su Fengshan cautiously walked to Chu Xiu's side and asked, "Young Master Chu, do you have any plans for going to Jianghu County?" Chu Xiu asked in response, "Why do I need a plan? Is there anything I need to plan for in Jianghu County?" Su Fengshan was taken aback. He said, "There are many things. For example, the previous county governor has just passed away, and the position of county governor has been vacant for a few months. The people's hearts are not stable. Also, after the uprising of the barbarians, although Pavilion Master killed a lot of them, there will definitely be others who will cause trouble. Cold River City is so close to Jianghu County. They might come to cause trouble. Now, even Su Fengshan couldn't figure out if this person was really muddle-headed or just pretending to be muddle-headed. Chu Xiu pointed to himself and said indifferently, "Is there a need for a plan for these things? I am the county governor of Jianghu County. I will kill anyone who disobeys me. Those barbarians aren't of our race, so they must have ulterior motives. If they dare to cause trouble, I will kill them as well. Jianghu County is the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory. Whoever dares to cause trouble will be killed as well. Is there a need for a plan for such a simple thing?" Su Fengshan was dumbfounded when he heard this. He simply couldn't find words to describe his feelings. Just listen to this. Are you even human? His temper was considered good. However, when he heard Chu Xiu spouting nonsense, he was so infuriated that he scoffed and turned to leave. When Chu Xiu saw Su Fengshan's action, he did not say anything else. He was not pretending to be a fool in front of Su Fengshan. He was really planning to do this. When he was in the lower realm, he had forces by his side. He had to consider the conflicts between various forces, the consequences, and other things. Therefore, he fought openly and secretly, and there were all sorts of schemes. However, this was the Daoist continent. Chu Xiu did not plan to sell his life to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, he could do as he pleased without any reservations. At this time, if he could speak with his fists, he would speak with his fists first. If he could solve the problem by killing one person, then he would not waste any more words. Moreover, if Ting Chunyu was really in the hands of the barbarians in the southern barbaric land, it was basically impossible for Chu Xiu to get her without killing them. As for Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong, he was too lazy to explain anything to them. They were sent by Lu Sanjin, and their roots were in the Imperial Sky Pavilion headquarters. They could maintain absolute loyalty, so Chu Xiu only needed them to be obedient. The group continued on their way, but the atmosphere became more awkward. Even the dozen or so real pellet state martial artists didn't communicate with Chu Xiu. The group seemed to be divided into two groups. However, while they were on their way, Chu Xiu suddenly realized that someone was watching him. That feeling was the same as when he was in Lingxiao City. Chu Xiu tried to check several times, but he didn't find anyone. He believed in his spiritual sense, but the person who spied on him obviously had better means. Chapter 11:16. After being spied on twice in a row, Chu Xiu's vigilance had risen to the extreme. The most important thing was that he didn't find anyone on both occasions. One had to know that Chu Xiu's spiritual sense could be said to be quite powerful. He had once pushed the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to the peak by burning his spirit. Although he couldn't replicate that state now, it also allowed Chu Xiu to obtain a stronger perception. As a result, he used the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to deduce the person who spied on him, but there was no clue at all. This was a little scary. The person who spied on him, at least in terms of mental strength, was definitely stronger than him. After finding no clues, Chu Xiu continued to lead the people on the road, but he was always observing the surroundings. However, the spying gaze never appeared again. Su Fengshan, Qin Zhong, and the others watched Chu Xiu nervously looking around. They didn't know what was going on, and they didn't dare to ask. They thought that this young master was crazy again. Jianghu County was close to the southern barbarian land. It should be said that a part of Jianghu County's land was in the southern barbarian land, and it was surrounded by dense forests. When Chu Xiu arrived at Jianghu County with his people, the scene he saw along the way was completely different from the other counties in the eastern region. The other counties in the eastern region, such as Fanglin County, had been developed very well. After entering Jianghu County, it was like entering a prefecture surrounded by dense forests. Often, they had to walk on a small path for half a day before they could see a prefecture that was protected by a tall city wall. The Jianghu County's prefectural governor's office was located in the Zhangnan Prefecture, which was located in the center of the county. This prefecture looked rather grand, even more so than the Anzhou Prefecture of Fanglin County. Chu Xiu could even see traces of arrays on the city walls. The warriors in Zhangnan Prefecture were also very different from the warriors in Fanglin County. All of them had a trace of faint evil spirit. It was conceivable that this place was not so peaceful. After entering the city, Su Fengshan glanced around and frowned. He wanted to say something, but he hesitated. When Chu Xiu saw his expression, he asked calmly, "Elder Su, is there something wrong?" Although Su Fengshan was somewhat dissatisfied with Chu Xiu, he was old and shrewd. He didn't want to offend Chu Xiu. When he heard Chu Xiu's question, he immediately said, "Something is wrong." Normally, a prefecture like Zhangnan Prefecture, which was directly under the jurisdiction of the prefectural governor, should have guards at the entrance. As you can see, young master, the city gates are empty. I have no idea how those fellows from the county governor's manor arranged it. Even if the prefectural governor wasn't around, how could the vast Jianghu County not have a steward? As far as I know, there are about a dozen or so deacons in an ordinary prefectural governor's manor. Even if Jianghu County lost more than half of its people, there should be at least 2 or 3 left. Chu Xiu nodded and did not say anything else. He waved his hand and headed straight for the prefectural governor's manor. At this moment, there were dozens of cultivators in the prefectural governor's manor. There were 3 of them who were in the true fire spirit refinement realm. The 3 of them were either frowning or indifferent. One of them was even taking a nap with his eyes closed. The frowning middle-aged man looked at the other 2 and said, "Hey, Lord Prefectural Governor is about to enter the city, right? Shall we go and welcome him?" This middle-aged man was Shenhui, the Jianghu County deacon. He was a local rogue cultivator who had joined the Imperial Sky Pavilion because he had done many things for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, the other deacons had gone back to the headquarters through their connections. His biggest connection was in Jianghu County, so how was he supposed to find someone? The indifferent person was a strong man with dark skin who did not look like a person from the Central Plains. His name was Kucha, and he was a mixed blood between a human and a barbarian. As half of his blood flowed in his veins, he was very popular among the barbarians in the south. Therefore, the previous prefectural governor had to rely on him when dealing with the barbarians. Although the prefectural governor was dead, even if there were 10 more prefectural governors, they would still put him in an important position. Therefore, he had an indifferent attitude. When he heard this, he waved his hand casually and said, "All right, let's go and welcome him." "Sun Qianxing, are you going?" Sun Qianxing, who was taking a nap, had a sinister look on his face. When he heard this, he said calmly, "What's the rush? Shenhui, the prefectural governor has only died a few days ago, and you're already eager to cling to your new master?" A trace of anger appeared on Shenhui's face, but he did not dare to say anything. Sun Qianxing was the head of the Jianghu County deacons. He had stayed in Jianghu County his entire life, so he was the only one who could sort out the complicated situation in this place. When the previous prefectural governor arrived, he was also a little dumbfounded by the many troublesome matters that he had to rely on Sun Qianxing to resolve. If Kucha's role was to deal with the barbarians, Sun Qianxing's role was to deal with the entire Jianghu County. Therefore, while everyone else was in a hurry to transfer them away, Sun Qianxing had no intention of doing so. In other counties, he was just an ordinary deacon. However, in Jianghu County, his role was greater than the prefectural governor's. Even the prefectural governor had to be polite to him. He had heard that the new prefectural governor was not a heaven and earth elemental opening realm expert, but a young man who had just stepped into the pugilistic world. This made Sun Qianxing look down on him. Although the new prefectural governor was the successor of a prime venerate, so what? In a place like Jianghu County, even the eastern region wayfarer Lu Sanjin would have to consult him if he came. Therefore, his attitude was naturally not like Shenhui's, who looked like he could not wait to curry favor with his new master. At that moment, someone outside reported that the new prefectural governor had arrived. Sun Xianxia said in surprise, "He's here so quickly?" He went straight to the prefectural governor's manor the moment he entered the city. "Let's go and welcome him." Shenhui kept mumbling behind him, "I told you to go out earlier." "Great, now that the new prefectural governor has to wait for us, we might get blamed." Sun Xianxia could not help but snort disdainfully when he heard this. The new prefectural governor was a greenhorn, while he and the others were veterans in Jianghu County. The new prefectural governor could only rely on them, so why did he have to be so humble and let others look down on him? When the group walked out, Chu Xiu and the others were already waiting in front of the hall. Although they knew that the new prefectural governor was the successor of a prime venerate and was not too old, they were still not used to seeing Chu Xiu's young age. "Greetings, prefectural governor." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said indifferently, "No need for formalities. Let me ask you something. Why is there no one guarding the Cangnan prefecture's city gates?" Shen Hui was stunned. He thought that the new prefectural governor would blame them for not going out to welcome the new prefectural governor. As the saying goes, a new official has to make drastic changes. He would definitely find an excuse to vent his anger. Who would have thought that the first thing he asked would be such a trivial matter? Kucha shrugged and said, "I didn't arrange it. I've never cared about the Cangnan prefecture's affairs." Sun Xianxia frowned and said, "My lord, the previous prefectural governor has just passed away and the people are still unsettled. How would they have the time to care about guarding the gates?" Chu Xiu stared at Sun Xianxia and said, "So you're saying that you don't want anyone to guard the gates?" Sun Xianxia snorted coldly and said, "My lord, this isn't a question of whether or not to do so. You've just arrived in Jianghu County and there are some things you don't understand. What we should be doing now is investigating the cause of the previous prefectural governor's death and reassuring the people. Are you teaching me how to do things?" Chu Xiu directly interrupted Sun Xianxia and took a step forward. He narrowed his eyes and said, "I only have one question for you. Why is there no one guarding the Cangnan prefecture's gates? Right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't want to hear a second answer." An intense pressure descended. Even Shen Hui and the previously indifferent Kucha were stunned. They never thought that Chu Xiu would make things difficult for them over such a small matter. Sun Xianxia gritted his teeth. He could admit defeat now, but he didn't want to. Sun Xianxia had managed Jianghu Prefecture for so many years and had contributed more than the prefectural governor. If it wasn't for the fact that his strength was slightly weaker and he hadn't stepped into the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm, the position of prefectural governor would definitely have been his. Therefore, he had his own pride. He could cooperate with the prefectural governor and do his best, but the condition was that the other party had to show him enough respect and courtesy. Chu Xiu's strength was obviously the same as his. It was only because he was Gu Zun's successor and was a good friend of Lu Sanjin, the Eastern Region wayfarer. Why? Moreover, the other party was so overbearing. Why should he admit defeat? The chaos in Jianghu Prefecture had just ended and more than half of the 10 wardens had run away. He was the only one who could stabilize the situation in Jianghu Prefecture. Therefore, he was certain that even if he offended Chu Xiu, the Imperial Sky Pavilion would not touch him. They might even ask Chu Xiu to consider the bigger picture. Therefore, Sun Xianxia replied stubbornly, "Sir, what do you mean by this? Why are you being so overbearing over such a small matter? This matter is urgent. How can there be any right or wrong? Do we have to report to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters even when we have a meal without the prefectural governor around?" Chu Xiu reached out and grabbed the hilt of his saber at his waist. He said calmly, "Wrong answer. I've said it before. I only want an answer of right or wrong. I'm the prefectural governor of Jianghu Prefecture. You'll do whatever I ask you to do. This is what a subordinate should do. You didn't answer the question and talked back to the superior. You can't even explain yourself. What use do I have for you? Sun Xianxiang's expression changed the moment he saw Chu Xiu holding his saber. However, he still did not believe that Chu Xiu would attack him here. Even among the Daoist, a person in the true fire spirit refinement realm would be considered an expert. In a large sect, he would be a core force like a warden. In the pugilistic world, it would not be a problem for him to establish his own sect like Lin Yazi. In the past, there had been punishments and demotions for prefectural governors to attack their subordinates. However, there had never been anyone like Chu Xiu, who attacked him over such a small matter. However, in the next moment, as Chu Xiu swung his saber, the sky was filled with saber gleams that shrouded everything. No matter what kind of power or the laws of heaven and earth they were all neatly sliced in half in front of this saber. Sun Xianxia did not even have the time to pick up his weapon. The qi and blood around him erupted and surged. However, before he could fully deploy his defenses, the invincible saber had already landed. His protective qi was torn apart like a piece of paper. His powerful qi and blood also withered instantly. Sun Xianxia didn't even have the chance to scream before he was killed. Chapter 11-17. After Chu Xiu killed Sun Xianxia, the entire prefectural governor manor fell silent. Everyone was stunned. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong, who were standing behind Chu Xiu and prepared to watch Chu Xiu make a fool of himself, no longer had the mood to do so. They felt that they were the real joke. When Su Fengshan asked Chu Xiu what he was going to do, Chu Xiu said that he would kill those who disobeyed him. He thought that Chu Xiu was talking nonsense. Now, it seemed that Chu Xiu was serious. Sun Xianxia was a capable, influential, and prestigious warden in Jianghu County. Yet, Chu Xiu killed him just like that. Wasn't he afraid of being reprimanded by the higher-ups? Wasn't he afraid that he wouldn't be able to do anything in Jianghu County? Qin Zhong secretly rejoiced. At the same time, he was grateful for Su Fengshan's warning. Fortunately, Su Fengshan had told him to be careful with his words. Otherwise, if he were to talk back to Chu Xiu, he might be killed as well. At this moment, Shen Hui and Kucha were dumbfounded. They had been in Jianghu County for so many years, but they had never seen someone like Chu Xiu who killed someone without hesitation. Was he here to be the prefectural governor, or was he sent by a rival sect to destroy the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Kucha was half a barbarian, so he did things like a barbarian. He respected powerhouses the most. Although Chu Xiu was at the true fire spirit refinement realm, the fact that he was able to kill Sun Xianxia, whose strength was on par with his, showed that his combat strength was definitely beyond his imagination. Therefore, Kucha lowered his head to Chu Xiu, expressing his obedience. Shen Hui shuddered and hurriedly bowed. "Please forgive us, sir. We were in the wrong. We slacked off because we thought the prefectural governor wasn't around. We didn't send anyone to guard the gate. Please forgive us, sir." Shen Hui was really frightened by this blade, and he even said a few words of forgiveness in succession. Chu Xiu said calmly, "There was no prefectural governor in the past, but there is now. Go, send 2 people to guard the gate. Remember, from now on, I am the governor of Jianghu County. I only want one thing, obedience. As long as you can do this, the rest is up to you." After saying that, Chu Xiu waved his hand and led everyone into the hall. Shen Hui and the others were once again dumbstruck. That was it? That's it? Shen Hui couldn't help but look at Sun Xianxing's corpse on the ground. He shuddered and cursed inwardly. He could now see that what Chu Xiu wanted was very simple, and that was people who were obedient. In the end, Sun Xianxia thought too highly of himself, but he met Chu Xiu, who didn't take him seriously at all. Now he was killed. Sun Xianxia died a wrong death because he had no idea what Chu Xiu wanted. He had only come to Jianghu County to look for Ting Chunyu. The position of county governor was just to use the Imperial Sky Pavilion's name. The development of Jianghu County had nothing to do with him. What did the previous county governor's death have to do with him at all? Cold River City was eyeing Jianghu County covetously. As long as they didn't provoke him, he naturally wouldn't provoke them. Since that was the case, what use was Sun Xianxia to him, Chu Xiu? A fellow who couldn't even be obedient was worse than trash. He could only be killed. As for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Chu Xiu wasn't worried at all. It could be said that the old pavilion master begged him to get his position. When the news got out, it wouldn't matter even if someone from the Imperial Sky Pavilion was displeased with him for killing people and wanted to remove him from the position of county governor. In any case, to Chu Xiu, the time he had to go back and forth was enough for him to get Ting Chunyu. After everyone entered the hall, Chu Xiu looked at them and said calmly, "I'm Chu Xiu. All of you just have to remember one thing. Jianghu County is under my jurisdiction from now on. That's enough. Now, introduce yourselves." The corners of everyone's mouths twitched a little. Among all the county governors in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, perhaps only this lord would use such a peculiar self-introduction. Kucha touched his forehead and bowed at Chu Xiu. This was the barbarian tribe's unique etiquette. He said respectfully, "I'm Kucha. Because half of my blood runs in me, I'm in charge of dealing with the barbarians in Jianghu County. Of course, to me, no matter which tribe I'm from, I'm just a deacon of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I'm loyal to the Imperial Sky Pavilion." Shenhui glanced at Kucha. This fellow didn't have this kind of attitude in the past. He was always indifferent to everything he did. Even when the previous county governor ordered him to do something, he always procrastinated. When had he ever been so respectful? Now that he had encountered a ruthless character, he behaved more obediently than the other. At this moment, Shenhui also stood up, bowed, and said, "I'm Shenhui. I'm familiar with all aspects of Jianghu County. I'll do whatever you want me to do, Lord." Chu Xiu nodded. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong introduced themselves again. After everyone knew each other's names, Chu Xiu then asked, "The Imperial Sky Pavilion said that a saber has appeared in the hands of the barbarian tribe in Jianghu County. Did you send the news to them?" Everyone was stunned when they heard this. No one had expected Chu Xiu's first question to be about a saber. Sun Xianxia had said that the first thing Chu Xiu should do after taking office was to investigate the real cause of the previous county governor's death. Calming the people's hearts was the most important thing. Although Sun Xianxia was bickering with Chu Xiu, the truth was that it should be like that. However, now that Chu Xiu asked about a saber and did not mention anything about the previous county governor at all, none of them could react. Su Fengshan wanted to remind Chu Xiu, but he swallowed his words when they were at the tip of his tongue. This person could not even be described as obstinate and self-opinionated. He was simply like a tyrant. He would not listen to anything anyone said. All he wanted was obedience. Although everyone present had their doubts, nobody dared to voice them out. Kucha said carefully, "This matter was indeed reported by Jianghu County. It happened not long before the barbarian riot." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Tell me about it." Kucha cleared his throat and said, "This is what happened. Because the previous county governor was slightly older, he was more stable and gentle. His attitude toward the barbarians was the same. Therefore, both sides often conducted trade and so on. I also represented the county governor's office to the depths of the Dilua Mountains to trade with the barbarian tribes. I have half the blood of the barbarians in me, and I know most of the barbarian tribes' languages. Therefore, they treated me quite well. That time, I accidentally discovered that a tribe called Hasla was acting strangely. That's right, Hasla means the cheetah that runs amok in the bushes. The Hasla tribe seemed to have obtained a saber. It was said that it was left behind by their ancestor, the ancient devil god. With this saber, they would be able to restore the glory of their ancestors and expel the outsiders. These tribes, especially those that lived in the depths of the Dilua Mountains, were very hostile to us. The Hasla tribe was one of the most hostile. I spent a large amount of money to bribe a person from a tribe that was on good terms with the Hasla tribe. He secretly memorized the appearance of the saber and came back to describe it to me. It was a scimitar that looked like a full moon. It exuded an astonishing demonic aura and sharpness. However, it was damaged, with cracks and nicks. There was also a line of text on the saber, which he also recorded. Although the text was different from the Daoist language, it was of the same origin. I could understand some of it. It was definitely not the language of the barbarians. I could only understand a few words. It seemed to say something like spring rain in the small building. Perhaps the barbarian had remembered the wrong strokes, causing the other words to be unclear. These barbarians often cause trouble. Hearing them talk about restoring the glory of their ancestors, I knew that they were definitely up to something. After I discovered it, I felt that something was wrong and reported it to the county governor. Because the barbarians hadn't made a move yet, the importance of this matter wasn't that high. Therefore, it was reported to the headquarters along with a pile of other information. When Kocha finished saying all these things in one breath, Chu Xiu could already be sure that the person holding the saber was listening to the spring rain in the small building. The demonic saber from the lower realm was actually regarded as some kind of ancestral divine weapon by these barbarian tribes. It was also very ridiculous. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "The others can go. Kocha, stay behind. Oh, by the way, clean up the corpses outside." Everyone left as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Kocha smiled bitterly in his heart. Chu Xiu's ferocity was too great. He really didn't want to stay here alone with Chu Xiu, but he didn't dare to refuse. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and asked, "How strong are the barbarians in the southern barbarian land? For example, the Hasla tribe that you mentioned?" Although Chu Xiu was asking about the barbarians, Kocha felt that he was actually concerned about the saber. However, Kocha didn't dare to ask too much. He thought for a moment and said, "The strength of these barbarians isn't considered weak. It can even be said that they are very strong. Not to mention all the barbarians added together, just the barbarians in my Jianghu County's Fanwei County aren't that easy to deal with. The martial arts system of these barbarians is different from ours. Although they also have some powerful warriors who can use various secret techniques to be on par with martial arts powerhouses, it's not easy to compare. Moreover, they also have many secret techniques that require many people to use together. The combined power is not small. I can only say that among these barbarian tribes, some of the smaller tribes are comparable to sects with true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists. As for the larger tribes, all kinds of strange secret techniques can be used to kill and injure heaven and earth mysterious enlightenment realm powerhouses. Fortunately, most of the tribes near my Jianghu County are some small tribes. Only those in the depths of the Dilua mountain range are those big tribes. Chu Xiu continued to knock on the table and asked, "That Hasla tribe, is it big or small?" Kocha smiled bitterly and said, "It's also a big tribe. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bribed other barbarians to secretly inquire. If I go by myself, I might not be able to come back." Chapter 11:18. The strength of the barbarians from Jianghu County was actually within Chu Xiu's expectations. After all, even the Imperial Sky Pavilion had died in their hands. During the barbarian tribe's uprising, a heaven and earth enlightening realm cultivator had died. Naturally, their strength could not be weak. Therefore, it would not be easy for Chu Xiu to get rid of them. "What's the situation with the barbarians now?" Ku Cha said. "After the barbarian tribe's uprising, the pavilion master personally led people here and annihilated 3 large barbarian tribes. He forced several barbarian tribes in the Dilua mountain range to join forces and beg for mercy. The pavilion master did not want to start a war with the barbarian tribes, so he did not continue to kill them. Since then, the barbarian tribes have become much more well-behaved and have not caused any more trouble. However, all these years, they have always been like this. When they become stronger, they will start to cause trouble. After being killed, they will become well-behaved. It's a typical example of people who don't learn their lesson. When Kucha said this, his tone was filled with disdain. He did not seem to think that he was actually a barbarian. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "All right. Tomorrow morning, accompany me to the border of the barbarian tribes to investigate the situation." Kucha smiled bitterly again. It seemed like he was being targeted by this lord. However, he could only nod and agree. On the second day, Chu Xiu gave some instructions to the others and brought Kecha out of the city. This caused everyone to be at a loss for words. This lord was also very capricious. On the second day of his appointment, he left without caring about anything. In reality, what else could Chu Xiu care about? He could not be bothered to come up with strategies for the Imperial Sky Pavilion to increase their strength. This time, there were 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators guarding the city gate. When they saw Chu Xiu, they quickly saluted him. Chu Xiu walked out of the city gate with Kucha. Just as he was about to let Kucha lead the way, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger surging toward him. His body abruptly shifted several hundred feet to the left, and a pitch-black arrow that was burning with world-destroying flames shot toward him at a rapid speed. Triple City-destroying arrow. Chu Xiu could never have imagined that he would be able to see the Triple City-destroying arrow in the Daoist Empire. However, this arrow was a little different from the Triple Link City Destruction arrow. The power of nirvanic extermination was a little less, and the flames of annihilation had a little more charm, but it was 90% similar. Wherever the arrow passed, any power began to evaporate under the tyrannical world annihilation fire. The person who shot that arrow had definitely reached the heaven and earth profound opening. Chu Xiu dodged the arrow, but for some reason, the sense of danger in his heart did not dissipate. In an instant, Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air was pushed to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally saw that the triple annihilation arrow from before was actually an illusion. The world-destroying fire fluctuated in the void, but there was nothing there. The real arrow was less than 100 feet away from him. What a terrifying illusion! At this moment, Chu Xiu was shocked. He cultivated the heaven sun gazing at air, and his spiritual sense was almost at the peak among those of the same level. Even so, he had been deceived without realizing it. To be more precise, he had not fallen for an illusion, but the person who had made the move had reached the level of materializing illusions into reality. Kecha and the 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators who were still at the city gate were also staring at the fake Triple City destroying arrow with a look of horror on their faces. The colorless ceiling palm madra shone brightly with Buddhist light, and space distorted. The Triple City destroying arrow twisted and exploded under the force of Chu Xiu's madra, but the power it emitted sent Chu Xiu flying more than 100 feet back. It's the heavenly net treasure again. That heretic's cultivation method is really annoying. Ripples appeared in the void, and a monk wearing a black robe embroidered with all kinds of mysterious runes appeared in front of Chu Xiu. He was said to be a monk because he was bald and had a string of pitch-black prayer beads hanging on his body. The other party's strength was indeed at the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm. Moreover, the powerful waves emitted from his body were not weak. At the very least, he was much stronger than Shang Tianliang and Ling Yunzi, who were at the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm. When they saw the appearance of the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm expert, Kecha and the 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion disciples immediately closed the city gate, activated the formation, and hid on the city wall. At the same time, they immediately went to inform the other Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators in the city. It was not that they did not want to help Chu Xiu on purpose, but in such a situation, with their strength, they would be killed with a single slap from the other party. Chu Xiu had only been appointed on the second day, and his attitude was so overbearing. It would be strange if they were loyal to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not care about them. Instead, he squinted at the strange monk and said, "Who are you?" You were the one who spied on me in Lingxiao City. You were also the one who spied on me on the road. I don't remember offending such an expert. The strange monk laughed strangely and said, I am Mariha, the palace master of the Illusion Sky Emperor Palace of the Sanskrit sect's Vishnu Temple. Kid, I don't care which branch of the primeval venerables you are, and I don't care whether you are the prefectural governor of the Imperial Sky Pavilion or not. Now, tell me, where did you get your world annihilation flame? When he heard that the other party was from the Sanskrit sect, Chu Xiu secretly cursed himself for being careless. There was actually no problem with Chu Xiu's cultivation technique. There was no need to talk about the cultivation techniques from the lower realm. Even if he used Dugu Weiwa's cultivation technique, he would still have an excuse. He could totally say that this was something that the founder of his bloodline had imitated when he fought against Dugu Weiwa. After 500 years of deduction, he had learned it. He planned to know himself and know his enemy, and he would never be defeated. However, Chu Xiu had a special cultivation technique. It belonged to the Sanskrit sect's Shiva Temple's Mahakala Temple's World Annihilation Flame. The Sanskrit sect was still a major sect in the western region, and it was the top existence in the entire Daoist world. In fact, Chu Xiu had been tricked by the 9 Phoenix Sword sect's records. According to the records, the Daoist sect's experts would not rashly enter another's territory. One reason was that the Daoist world was vast, and the other was that it was easy to cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would be so coincidental? The eastern and western regions were so far apart, but there were people from the Sanskrit sect here to observe the ceremony, and they just happened to see Chu Xiu use the world annihilation flame. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, attacking without even asking, "Is this the style of your Sanskrit sect? My ancestor was very famous before the ancient calamity, and he had interacted with many experts and exchanged cultivation techniques. What's so strange about knowing your Sanskrit sect's world annihilation flame? That was given to my ancestor by your Sanskrit sect's ancestor." Mariha's face darkened, and he scolded, "Bullshit. The Mahakala temple was built by my Sanskrit sect to deal with the life transformation pavilion of the heavenly Luo treasure temple 5,000 years ago. The world annihilation flame was also created to restrain the pure lotus Buddha light of the life transformation pavilion. Could it be that your ancestor could travel through time and learn the world annihilation flame 5,000 years later?" Chu Xiu fell silent. It was very embarrassing to be exposed. Mariha said coldly, "Tell me, where did your world annihilation flame come from?" "Since 500 years ago, since the Mahakala temple disappeared, the inheritance of the world annihilation flame has only been in the hands of a few people in my Sanskrit sect, and it's impossible for it to be leaked. Tell me, did you discover the Mahakala temple? I advise you to tell me obediently, or else when I cripple your cultivation and drag you into the god-bewitching realm, that feeling of sinking into a boundless purgatory won't feel good. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're the successor of Primogenitor and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's prefectural governor. My Sanskrit sect has been investigating the whereabouts of the Mahakala temple for 500 years, and I've also taken over this matter for 100 years. Anyone who tries to stop me will be the enemy of my Sanskrit sect. It's not like my Sanskrit sect hasn't killed martial immortals before. Ever since 500 years ago, the Mahakala temple took the clues found by their Sanskrit sect, bypassed the few large sects in the southern region, and tried to enter the legendary ancestral land. They never returned, and there were no signs of life. The Sanskrit sect investigated this matter for 500 years, and the final result was that the Mahakala temple didn't perish in the hands of the few large sects in the southern region, nor did it perish in the hands of the barbarian race. Before attempting to enter the ancestral land, they even contacted the Sanskrit sect once, but there were no signs of life after that, and they disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they had successfully entered the ancestral land, or if some other accident had happened. The Mahakala temple carried the missions of the Sanskrit sect, as well as all kinds of secrets regarding the ancestral land, so even after 500 years, the Sanskrit sect didn't give up on searching for the Mahakala temple. The various palace lords under the 3 main halls, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, were all existences in the heaven and earth mystic insight realm, and they took turns to search for clues of the Mahakala temple. And even without considering the matter of the ancestral land, the Mahakala temple was also the strongest divine palace of the Sanskrit sect. Back then, the Sanskrit sect was severely suppressed by the heavenly Luo Buddha, so the experts of the Shiva palace, who had the strongest battle power, joined hands and researched the world-extinguishing fire, and created the Mahakala temple to restrain the heavenly Luo Buddha's purifying lotus light. So among all the divine palaces of the Sanskrit sect, the Mahakala temple was the strongest, and its palace lord had even reached the realm of half-step martial immortal, and there were even 5 experts in the heaven and earth mystic insight realm in the entire Mahakala temple. So many experts had gone and never returned, and no one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead, and no one knew if they were dead, so no matter what, there had to be an explanation. Moriha had already taken over this matter for more than 100 years, and he had more or less visited the 4 regions of the north, south, east, and west, but he still didn't have any clues, so he was already prepared to return to the western region to take over this matter. Going to High Heaven City to watch the martial arts exhibition was just a sudden impulse of his, and he did not expect that he would actually see the world-extinguishing fire in the martial arts exhibition. Ever since the disappearance of the Mahakala temple, it had not been rebuilt. Although the palace lords could cultivate the world-extinguishing fire, it was only a supplementary cultivation, and it was absolutely impossible for it to be taught to outsiders. The origin of the world-extinguishing fire in Chu Xiu's body was self-evident. He did not expect that at the last moment of his handover, he would actually encounter a clue. This was an opportunity that the heavens had given to him, Moriha. After leaving High Heaven sect, he had secretly followed Chu Xiu, but because there were people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion around, it was not easy for him to make a move. Although he had been spying on Chu Xiu along the way, he was also afraid of attracting the experts from the Imperial Sky Pavilion, so he had been enduring. It was only when Chu Xiu arrived at Jianghu County that he confirmed that there were no heaven and earth mystic insight experts from the Imperial Sky Pavilion in Jianghu County that he showed himself and made a move. Chapter 11:19. When Chu Xiu heard the words 500 years ago, his eyes immediately shone with a divine light. Things that he didn't understand before, he understood now. Existences like the Royal Sky Pavilion and the Sanskrit sect not only knew about the ancestral land of the lower realm, they also knew that there were people in the ancestral land. The only difference was that the Sanskrit sect should have found some clues and possibly returned to the ancestral land. However, this clue was in the southern barbaric land, it didn't belong to the Sanskrit sect sphere of influence. They didn't dare to go with great fanfare, so they only sent the great obscurus deity Pallas to secretly go to the lower realm. And from what Moriha said, he shouldn't be sure that the great obscurus deity Pallas had already successfully gone to the lower realm. So, he questioned where Chu Xiu got the world-extinguishing flame, and not to confirm the relationship between Chu Xiu and the lower realm. The people from the Sanskrit sect didn't expect that the great obscurus deity Pallas had actually succeeded. Without the sky connecting key, they had brought everyone to the lower realm safely. However, it was fate. It could only be said that the Sanskrit sect was simply unlucky to the extreme. If the great obscurus deity Pallas had descended a bit later and encountered the Kunlun devil cult being annihilated, the righteous path of martial arts had suffered great losses, and the heavenly gates had been almost killed by Dugu Weiwei, the great obscurus deity Pallas would have been an invincible existence. A half-step martial immortal and 5 profound understanding realm experts were enough to dominate the pugilistic world of that era. And if the great obscurus deity Pallas had descended a bit earlier and missed the period of the rise of the Kunlun devil cult, as long as they didn't provoke the heavenly gates or the righteous path of martial arts, nothing would have happened. In the end, the great obscurus deity Pallas had chosen the most coincidental time to descend. The Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, Dugu Weiwei dominated the pugilistic world, Ning Xuanji was peerless, and the righteous path of martial arts also produced many experts. That period of time was the most chaotic period in the pugilistic world, but it was also the strongest period. There were many, many people who could defeat the great obscurus deity palace. It could only be said that they were unlucky. At this time, Chu Xiu also thought of something that he had neglected before. Chu Xiu had been pondering over how to return to the lower realm. In the beginning, Chu Xiu had placed his hopes on the heavenly gates. He was now certain that the Elysium was connected to the Daoist. As long as he found the point of contact, he might be able to return. However, he had forgotten that Mahakala deity palace had brought an entire deity palace's people to the lower realm. Since they could go down, then he could naturally do so as well. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Moriha with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. Since Moriha had investigated the great obscuro deity palace for more than 500 years, he definitely had detailed clues regarding the great obscuro deity palace in the past. If he were to get rid of him, he might be able to obtain the clue that Mahakala deity palace had gone to the lower realms in the past. Moriha wanted to continue interrogating Chu Xiu, but he saw a hint of killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes. This caused Moriha to be stunned. What was this guy trying to do? Shouldn't he be thinking about how to escape? Yet, he still dared to reveal killing intent towards him. At this moment, Chu Xiu's formation-breaking sword was unsheathed. The resplendent sword light covered the heaven and earth, and everything was sliced apart by this sword. It was as if nothing in the world could block the sharpness of Chu Xiu's sword. Seeing that Chu Xiu still dared to take the initiative to attack, Moriha coldly snorted and said, "Stubborn fool, you're courting death." Kocha, who was watching the battle from above the city gates, could not help but gape. This prefectural governor was a little too fierce. He was facing an ultimate expert at the heaven and earth Elysium realm, yet he still dared to take the initiative to attack. Kocha did not know how to describe this. Moriha's black monk robes fluttered, and as he formed seals with his hands, the surrounding heaven and earth distorted in an instant. With the two of them as the center, the area within several hundred feet was completely distorted into a huge rainbow bubble. No one could see what was happening inside. At this moment, Su Fengshan and the rest of the people in the prefectural governor's office rushed over. When they saw this scene, they were shocked and quickly asked Kocha, "What's going on?" Kocha smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know either. I saw this guy sneak an attack on the prefectural governor as soon as I left the city. He's a heaven and earth Elysium realm expert. I didn't even dare to go near him." Everyone present was silent as well. They did not even have the right to interfere in a battle of this level. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong exchanged glances and smiled bitterly in silence. They knew that this wasn't going to be a good errand. However, they did not expect Kangwu County to be so dangerous. In broad daylight, someone had attacked the Imperial Sky Pavilion's prefectural governor outside the Imperial Sky Pavilion's prefectural governor's office. Was there no law here? Moreover, the attacker was a heaven and earth Elysium realm expert. The two of them did not even dare to imagine such danger. At that moment, Chu Xiu, who was in the huge bubble, furrowed his brows. The break formula's saber intent slashed through thin air, and Moriha's figure was no longer in front of him. The huge bubble was a kind of domain. Chu Xiu's formation-breaking technique, primal attraction, should have been the best at restraining domains. However, the domain that Moriha set up was extremely special. It was not a domain that normally controlled the heaven and earth Elysium, but a spiritual domain. The illusion heavenly palace of Vishnu Palace was most proficient in illusory techniques and spiritual attacks. As the palace master, Moriha had cultivated his illusory techniques to the extreme and had reached the stage where he could condense illusions into reality. Formation breaking could turn all energy into extreme Yin energy, but this kind of completely illusory spiritual energy could restrain the effect of formation breaking. His opponent was a heaven and earth Elysium realm expert, but he was restraining Chu Xiu's weapon. At this moment, Chu Xiu was already at a disadvantage. Moriha's figure appeared around Chu Xiu, in all directions, as if there were thousands of incarnations. These figures said in unison, "Don't struggle, don't resist, obediently tell the origin of the world-extinguishing fire. In this place, the sky is high and the emperor is far away, no one will come to save you. Countless voices opened their mouths at the same time. It was like a devil's voice piercing the ears, resounding in Chu Xiu's mind, shaking his head until it hurt. Letting out a long breath, Chu Xiu raised the heaven's sun, gazing at air to the extreme. The figures in front of him began to blur and distort, and only one figure was the clearest. The next moment, the misty slash fell, and time and space were frozen. That figure was also frozen in the void by the misty slash. When Chu Xiu's saber fell, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. In the next moment, the saber momentum reversed, and a black lotus had appeared under Chu Xiu's feet. The black lotus bloomed, and the lotus petals were like hot blades. They were stained with the world-extinguishing fire and surged towards Chu Xiu. The misty slash blocked the lotus petals. At the same time, Chu Xiu's body also bloomed with wisps of world-extinguishing fire. He used the world-extinguishing fire to deal with the world-extinguishing fire, extinguishing it. However, compared to Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing fire, Mariha's world-extinguishing fire had a trace of spiritual pressure that could melt the soul. After all, he was a supreme expert in the ethereal enlightenment realm. After learning the world-extinguishing fire, he would not cultivate it step by step. Instead, he added his own martial arts understanding into it. Your reaction is quite fast. I can feel that you have cultivated a spiritual secret technique of the Taoist lineage. TSK, cultivating the three lineages of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic at the same time. Who exactly is your lineage? Unfortunately, no matter how much you know, it's useless. Is it real or fake? Is it an illusion or is it real? How can you be sure that what you see is real? The figure that Chu Xiu had locked onto began to blur. It completely distorted and disappeared, while Mariha's figure appeared in another direction, looking at him with a faint smile. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's heart immediately sank. Mariha could be said to be the most troublesome enemy he had ever encountered. With Chu Xiu's current strength, even if Chu Xiu went to the lower realm to fight with Su Ci, Rama, and the others, Chu Xiu would still dare to take action. He also had the strength to fight. Mariha's strength and foundation might not be as good as Su Ci and Rama's, but with his strange illusory technique, few warriors of the same level could match him. To be more precise, it should be said that there was no way to deal with him. Mariha waved his hand, and in the entire space, countless black lotuses bloomed. In each black lotus, there was a world annihilation flame. The densely packed black lotuses surged towards Chu Xiu. Right now, he couldn't tell if these things were real or fake. Chu Xiu snorted coldly. He formed a seal with his hand, and the Buddha Dharma idol appeared behind him. On the left side of the Buddha Dharma idol was solemn and dignified. Buddha's light shone, and Vairocana shone through the ages. On the right side, there was a furious and ferocious Mahakala demon god with 3 eyes, destroying the world. In an instant, the scorching Buddha's light and the cold world annihilation flame spread out in all directions. That power even caused Mariha's expression to change slightly. He had actually combined the world annihilation flame with a Buddhist cultivation method. This was definitely not something that could be done overnight. At this moment, Mariha had a faint guess in his heart. Something must have happened to the people of Mahakala Demon God Palace, but they were discovered by the ancestral master of this kid's faction and obtained the world annihilation flame. After many years of research, he had reached this level. He did not suspect that this was created by Chu Xiu. How old was this kid? How could he fuse the power of 2 attributes so perfectly? But so what if he was a Guzun? A Guzun in the martial immortal realm was indeed an existence that the large sects were not willing to provoke. However, the premise was that there was no conflict of interest between them. Now that Chu Xiu's faction had clues about Mahakala Demon God Palace in their hands, even if his master was a Guzun, the Sanskrit sect must force the truth out of him. At this moment, under the burning power of Vairocana demon god and Mahakala demon god, the endless black lotuses had already disappeared. However, these things were all fake. Everything was fake. Chu Xiu's attack was simply a waste of energy. Moriha smiled proudly. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly discovered that a crack had been torn in his domain. The sky wept and blood rain suddenly descended. Chapter 11:20. Moriha's illusion was so powerful that even Chu Xiu could not do anything about it. It seemed real and illusory. You thought it was fake, but it turned out to be real. You thought it was real, but it turned out to be fake. Under this kind of illusion, Chu Xiu would be exhausted to death sooner or later. Therefore, after he condensed Vairocana and Mahakala, he immediately used the devil wailing heaven great compassion mantra while enduring the huge consumption of power from using two supreme martial skills at the same time. The power of the great compassion mantra came from the extreme malice and all kinds of negative forces in the world. Any illusion was meaningless in front of it. When the sky cried and blood rain fell, everything had nowhere to hide. Looking at the demonic image in the air tearing apart the heavens and earth and grabbing at him, Moriha smiled coldly and said, using two supreme martial techniques at the same time, your physical body is very strong, to actually be able to withstand this kind of impact. But do you really think that I'm only good at illusion and can't compete with the warriors of the same level in other areas? As Moriha's voice fell, a chaotic fog shrouded his whole body and stretched for hundreds of feet. Like a giant python, it wrapped around the devil's arm. The chaotic fog revealed itself and gradually became very clear. It turned into 1,000 giant pythons and completely wrapped around the devil. This was the divine beast worshipped by the Vishnu temple, the giant snake Ananta. It was said to be the companion of Vishnu, one of the three gods of Sanskrit. Although Moriha was good at illusions, he was, after all, an existence in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He also knew some of the other martial arts and secret techniques of Sanskrit. Even if the power of the great compassion mantra was tricky, it would not be able to hurt him. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's body suddenly burst out with boundless qi and blood. A blood pillar shot up to the sky. He actually directly used the blood demon transformation technique and slashed at Moriha crazily with the formation-breaking tool in his hand. Taking advantage of the devil wailing heaven great compassion mantra tearing the illusion, Chu Xiu could only take advantage of this time to pose a threat to Moriha. Moriha frowned. He could see that Chu Xiu wanted to fight with his life, but in fact, he did not want to fight with his life. It was not that he was afraid of death. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could pose a threat to him. He was worried that Chu Xiu would die. He still wanted to force the whereabouts of the Mahakala palace from Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu died, how could he do that? Therefore, Moriha could only try his best to resist the pressure of the demon god's giant hand formed by the great compassion mantra while resisting Chu Xiu. He could not be too heavy-handed because he was afraid that if he really killed Chu Xiu, his only clue would be gone. Finally, when the power of the great compassion mantra reached its limit, Moriha laughed and said, "What other trump cards do you have now? I already said that if you surrender and tell me everything, you might be able to keep your life. Now that your qi and blood have been completely burned, there is no meaning in living. I will be a good person. After reading your memories, I will send you on your way." Moriha waved his hand. In an instant, a large python formed from chaotic qi directly swept Chu Xiu's figure. The divine light in Moriha's eyes soared. Everything around him was like a vortex that overlapped and twisted, completely swallowing Chu Xiu. Moriha directly pushed his mental energy to the maximum limit. Only then could he read all of Chu Xiu's mental energy without missing a single bit. But in the next moment, memory fragments that were like a torrent made Moriha's face turn pale. He could not even control his own memories. Those were not the memory fragments of one person, but the memory fragments of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people. Moriha did not even have the time to carefully look at the contents of those memory fragments. If not for his extremely strong mental energy, he might have been shocked into an idiot in an instant. How is this possible? This is absolutely impossible. How can there be so many memory fragments of people in a person's mind? At this time, Chu Xiu, who was shrouded by the vortex, showed a strange smile to Moriha. But I am not human. Moriha's expression instantly changed. However, before he could react, a long saber with a deep demonic aura had already pierced through his heart from the back and pierced through his entire body. In an instant, a powerful demonic chi suddenly erupted. Together with the sharpness of the saber, it tore Moriha's meridians, leaving him no chance of survival. Even though his vitality was completely cut off, Moriha still relied on his powerful mental energy to turn his head. Looking at the pale Chu Xiu behind him, he widened his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "When did it start?" "You said it. What's real and what's fake, like an illusion yet real. Tell me, when did it start?" Before Moriha could speak, Chu Xiu's hand bloomed with a strong power of nirvanic extermination, completely killing all of Moriha's vitality. Pulling out the saber and throwing Moriha's corpse aside, Chu Xiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, his face was as pale as paper. Obviously, his mental energy was exhausted to the extreme. The fake Chu Xiu also dissipated, and a trace of mental energy hid in Chu Xiu's mind. The inner demon side in Chu Xiu's mind, among all the warriors I have seen, this guy has cultivated his mental energy to the extreme. He can even fuse his spiritual energy into this world to create a state that is both real and fake, a state that seems real and illusory at the same time. Rare, truly rare. Chu Xiu had no time to care about the excitement of the inner demon. His mental energy had been overconsumed, and he had a splitting headache. It was even more serious than the sequela of burning his qi and blood. In Chu Xiu's opinion, the danger of this battle was second only to the time when he faced Jun Wushan's head-piercing 7 arrows. Chu Xiu's strength was strong enough. If he encountered someone who had just stepped into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he could definitely fight with him, and the outcome was still uncertain. If he encountered someone who was stronger than him in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, such as Rama Shutzi from the mortal world, Chu Xiu also had the confidence to deal with him with his many trump cards. However, if he encountered someone like Moriha, who had extremely strong mental energy and could play tricks with illusions, the number of ways that Chu Xiu could deal with him could be counted on one hand. So on the surface, it seemed that both sides were competing with strength, but Chu Xiu had always been attacking his mind. Moriha was too confident. In his opinion, there were warriors who were stronger than him in the same realm, but those who could beat him in mental energy and illusions were unique. Even the existence in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was like this, not to mention Chu Xiu. Moreover, from the beginning, Chu Xiu's martial arts showed that he was fierce and overbearing, and his strength foundation was extremely deep. He never thought that Chu Xiu's fatal blow to him was actually an illusion. Moriha thought that Chu Xiu had used the two strongest martial arts techniques of the double-faced Buddha and the Great Compassion Mantra at the same time. In fact, from that time on, Chu Xiu had injected all his mental energy into the body of the inner demon. Taking advantage of the moment when the Great Compassion Mantra tore open Moriha's illusion domain, he also integrated his mental energy into it and transformed it into the appearance of Chu Xiu. Next, the inner demon began to simulate Chu Xiu's desperate fight with Moriha. In fact, those were all illusions, but the inner demon's ability to imitate was too strong. It had once entered Chu Xiu's primordial spirit, so it could be said that it knew Chu Xiu very well. Even if it was someone who was familiar with him, he would not be able to recognize him in a short time, let alone Moriha. However, for every breath of time that the inner demon existed, Chu Xiu had to consume a part of his mental energy. To maintain this illusion, even if Chu Xiu's mental energy was not weak, he could not maintain it for a long time. If there was any accident, Chu Xiu would be discovered by Moriha, and his plan would fall short of success. This battle was extremely dangerous, and Moriha also became the first expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth to die in his hands. It could only be said that Chu Xiu's luck was good enough, and Moriha was unlucky enough, or it could be said that he was still too confident. Perhaps in Moriha's view, to deal with Chu Xiu, a warrior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, he could do it himself, and there was no need to go back to Sanskrit to find someone. If Moriha was cautious and returned to Sanskrit to gather a group of experts before taking action, Chu Xiu really would not have a chance to fight at all. After resting for dozens of breaths, the pain in Chu Xiu's mind eased a little. He carried Moriha's body back to Cangnan Mansion. Kucha and the others were at the city gate, but they seemed to have been scared silly, and did not even dare to say a word. Previously, Moriha's illusion domain covered one side of the world, and they could not see anything clearly. Later, they vaguely saw a demon god's giant hand tearing the sky and earth, and 1,000 giant snakes dancing, and other terrifying scenes. Later, when the illusion domain dissipated, they saw the scene of Moriha being stabbed to death by Chu Xiu's saber. It was a shock to their worldview. They had seen the junior succeed the senior, but that only happened to low-level warriors. But now, Chu Xiu actually stabbed a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert to death in front of them, which shocked them so much that they were speechless. Now, there was no one who was not convinced by Chu Xiu. Although the former prefectural governor was also in the heaven and earth mysterious realm, he was already old, and it was still unknown whether he could kill a warrior of the same level. But Chu Xiu, with the cultivation of the true fire spiritual refinement realm, killed a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert in front of them. This show of power was simply 10,000 times better than when Chu Xiu killed Sun Qianxing with his saber. At the same time, they also silently mourned for him in their hearts. If Sun Qianxing had seen this scene today, he would definitely not go against Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu told him that ice was hot and fire was cold, and that his wife was discussing the philosophy of life with other men at home, he would not hesitate to believe it. However, Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong trembled even more. What kind of place was Jianghu County? Even a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert could make a move casually, and he could even be killed easily. They would be experts in other places, but they were really nothing here. When Chu Xiu dragged the corpse into the city, everyone instinctively took a step back, and fear appeared in their eyes. Looking at them, Chu Xiu said calmly, "This person is an enemy of mine, and he's here to avenge a personal grudge. This has nothing to do with the Imperial Sky Pavilion or Jianghu County. Don't worry." Chapter 11:21. It would be troublesome for Chu Xiu to kill a palace lord of the Sanskrit sect in front of everyone, but he was not worried. His title as the successor of the primogenitor was very useful. Anything could be explained away with a personal grudge. One should not think that the inheritance of the primogenitor was something that appeared out of thin air and would not be tainted by any karma. Even if one had never stepped out of the pugilistic world, karma from 10,000 years ago would still find one. Moreover, this matter wouldn't spread out so quickly. Moriha did not report this matter to the Sanskrit sect, so they did not know that Chu Xiu was related to the Mahakala palace for the time being. Moreover, Su Fengshan and the others would not spread the news. This was not because they were loyal, but because they could not. Jianghu County was very far from the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, so they would only send a message every once in a while. Sending a message required the use of a formation, and the only thing that could activate the formation was the prefectural governor's warrant. Therefore, they needed Chu Xiu's permission to send any message, unless they used other channels to slowly send it out. Su Fengshan and the others looked at each other and did not say a word. They dispersed quietly. They could more or less recognize that the person who was killed was probably someone from the Sanskrit sect. However, the Sanskrit sect was far away in the western region, so what did it have to do with them? They were getting more and more confused about Chu Xiu, so it was best for them not to say anything about this matter. After returning to the prefectural governor's residence, Chu Xiu did not immediately check what was on Moriha's body. Instead, he went into seclusion to recover his overdrawn mental energy. In the Daoist territory, Chu Xiu did not have anyone he could trust, unlike in the lower realm where he had trusted aides like Mei Qinglian to protect him. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to maintain his peak condition at all times to be able to deal with all kinds of accidents. It took Chu Xiu 3 whole days to recover 80% of his overdrawn mental strength. As for the remaining 20%, he just needed to recuperate for a period of time. After rummaging through Moriha's body, Chu Xiu took out a secret space box and carefully opened it. However, there was no protection in it. Moriha was a very confident person. Perhaps it could be said that he was very conceited. He didn't believe that anyone could kill him and steal his secret space box, so he didn't put any protection on it. By the time Chu Xiu had picked out all kinds of elixirs, materials, and other messy things, he was dumbfounded when he saw some of the written records. It was all written in Sanskrit, which he could not understand. However, what was more convenient for the Daoist compared to the lower realm was that the various legacies had not been severed, so it was much easier to find something. Chu Xiu asked Su Fengshan to find him some Sanskrit reference books and began to decipher them word by word. Some of Moriha's ancient books were cultivation methods, but Chu Xiu was not interested. He only familiarized himself with them. Moriha's personal characteristics in the cultivation of illusion were too strong. Not everyone who cultivated a cultivation method to the heaven and earth mysterious realm could have Moriha's attainments in illusion. His heart demon was very interested in it, so Chu Xiu put it aside and released a touch of mental strength to let his heart demon check the contents. After filtering out some other messy things, Chu Xiu finally found what he wanted. It was a detailed record of how Sanskrit discovered the ancestral land 500 years ago and why they sent Mahakala deity palace into the ancestral land. The root of all this actually came from an accident. Sanskrit had once killed a rogue cultivator from the southern barbarian land. The other party was like Kocha, a half-human and half-barbarian mixed blood. Originally, it was just a personal grudge, but later Sanskrit found some interesting things on him. There were many things on him that did not belong to him, but belonged to the legendary ancestral land. But he was already dead, so Sanskrit could only rely on that generation's illusion celestial palace to take the initiative to extract a few useful fragments from his dissipated primordial spirit. The content of the fragment was that he was originally a mixed blood of 2 races, was bullied, and was expelled from his tribe. In the end, he accidentally discovered a place. Although the vitality was not as rich as that of the Daoist, there were many Daoist things that were already extinct. So he relied on the things in that place to trade with the outside world, in exchange for various cultivation resources, all the way to where he was now. That person grew up in the barbarian land, so he did not know the existence of the ancestral land, nor did he know where he went. But Sanskrit knew very well. 500 years ago, Sanskrit was still suppressed by the heavenly Luo treasure temple, and even to an extremely miserable state. So Sanskrit decided to send Mahakala deity palace to the southern barbarian land to find that place, to see if they could enter the ancestral land and bring back the origin. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows lightly. This was the second time he saw this phrase. Previously, in the primitive demon cave, he saw the image left behind by Dugu Weiwei, and Dugu Weiwei had also searched for the origin in the primitive demon cave. Now, was the origin that Sanskrit was searching for the same thing that Dugu Weiwei wanted? Chu Xiu continued to read. The next part was much simpler. Sanskrit only extracted a simple location from the primordial spirit fragment, and the rest had to be found by Mahakala deity palace themselves. The last contact between Mahakala deity palace and Sanskrit was before they entered the ancestral land. They told Sanskrit that they had successfully found a clue to enter the ancestral land, but in the end, there was nothing. There was no contact, and even the karma on their bodies had disappeared. That generation's Lord of Vishnu Palace had once personally deduced their clues, but in the end, there was no harvest at all. It was as if those people from Mahakala deity palace had never appeared in this world. After putting away these information records and other things, Chu Xiu let out a long breath. He closed his eyes slightly, and countless plans and conjectures flashed through his mind. Moriha thought that Chu Xiu was his opportunity, but in fact, for Chu Xiu, he was Chu Xiu's opportunity. Previously, Chu Xiu was still thinking about how to find the connection between the heavenly gates and the lower realm, but now it seemed that there was no need for that. He had found a better way to return to the lower realm. Although there was no record of how Mahakala Deity Palace finally found that place, since Mahakala Deity Palace could find it, so could he, Chu Xiu. In particular, Mahakala Deity Palace had to quietly come to the southern barbarian land from the western region, and this Jianghu county was under the jurisdiction of Chu Xiu. It was undoubtedly more convenient for him to make a move than Mahakala Deity Palace. After resting in the prefectural governor's mansion for a few days, Chu Xiu called Kocha and prepared to go to the border of the barbarian tribe to observe again. This time, when Kocha followed behind Chu Xiu out of the city, he was obviously a tall and mighty man, but in the end, he was like a thief, looking around vigilantly, for fear that another expert would attack and kill Chu Xiu. He did not want to implicate him again. He was really scared. Fortunately, this time it was still safe, and there were no more accidents. The place with the most barbarian tribe in Jianghu County was the junction of the southern and Dilua mountain range. There was an abandoned prefecture called Nan'an Prefecture there, and there was no one managing it. There were no decent martial arts forces there, but there were many warriors and barbarian tribe members, because this was the place where the barbarian tribe and the human race conducted business. Stepping into the Nan'an Prefecture, it was noisy. The originally orderly streets were now in chaos, and there were barbarians and warriors who came to trade everywhere. This was the first time that Chu Xiu saw these so-called barbarian tribe members. Their appearance was very different from the people of the Central Plains, and also different from the people of the western region of the lower domain. All of them had dark skin, tall statures, and prominent facial features. Their exposed skin and faces were also tattooed with all kinds of strange patterns and characters. Most of the brute tribe did not wear clothes made from silk or linen. Instead, they wore clothes made from various beast skins and special plants. However, there was also a portion of them who wore armor. Judging from the appearance of those armors, one could tell that they were definitely created by the equipment refiners of great overarching heaven. Chu Xiu could feel power in the bodies of these barbarian tribe members. Some of them had pure physical strength, and some of them had a very mysterious power in their bodies. It was not qi, but it was somewhat similar to the yuan qi of heaven and earth, so it was difficult to judge their strength. Kocha seemed to be very famous here, and there were many people who knew him. When the barbarian tribe members faced the Daoist warriors, even if they were just trading with them, their expressions would be fierce and fierce. But when it was Kocha's turn to greet them, these barbarian tribe members laughed heartily, appearing very hearty. Chu Xiu said, "I didn't expect you to be so popular here." Kocha hurriedly said, "The barbarian tribe is very xenophobic. It's because I have half barbarian blood in me, and I'm proficient in their language, and because of the previous governor's conciliatory policies, which brought them many benefits, that's why I'm able to get this kind of attitude from them." Chu Xiu strolled on the streets as he asked, "What are most of the barbarian tribe members who come here to trade?" Kocha said, "Most of them are people from small tribes who come here to trade and exchange for some random things. There are really big tribes, but those big tribes usually get in touch with middlemen in advance and directly trade with the sections. They won't set up stalls on the streets casually. Actually, this is what I used to do in the past, representing the Imperial Sky Pavilion to trade with the big tribes of the barbarian tribe." Chu Xiu nodded. He seemed to be casually strolling around the entire South Peace Prefecture, but he was actually carefully observing the barbarian tribe's way of doing things, as well as their expressions, and so on. If you love someone, you need to understand them deeply. If you want to deal with someone, you also need to understand them deeply. In fact, most of the time, as long as the conditions were right, Chu Xiu liked to plan before taking action. Kocha continued to stroll behind Chu Xiu. He didn't dare to ask what Chu Xiu was thinking. Right now, he definitely feared Chu Xiu more than he respected him. After strolling around the entire South Peace Prefecture, Chu Xiu and Kocha went to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's temporary encampment in South Peace Prefecture to rest. Chu Xiu called out to Kocha, who was about to prepare a meal, and suddenly asked, "Tell me, if I want to destroy all the barbarian tribe in South Peace Prefecture, what should I do?" When he heard this, Kocha's legs turned to jelly. Chapter 11:22. Kocha really could not figure out what Chu Xiu was thinking. Previously, he did not care about the previous prefectural governor's death and was instead concerned about the saber. Now, he actually wanted to kill all the barbarians in Jianghu County. What exactly was he trying to do? Kocha replied cautiously, "My lord, that's impossible. Although these barbarian tribes seemed to be very loose and fought with each other, but in the face of foreign enemies, they were still very united. These are not the only barbarian tribes in Jianghu County that we saw. There are many more barbarian tribes in the depths of the Dilua Mountains. Even when the pavilion master came and ruthlessly destroyed a few tribes, in the blink of an eye, a few more tribes from the Dilua Mountains migrated over and filled the gap. Moreover, if we kill too many of them, the barbarian powerhouses hidden in the depths of the mountains will also make a move. By then, the situation might be even worse. It's not something that the Imperial Sky Pavilion can handle alone." Chu Xiu nodded and gestured for Kocha to take a seat. He said calmly, "There's no hurry to eat. Let me ask you about the details of these barbarians first." Kocha hurriedly said, "Don't worry, sir. I'll definitely tell you everything I know." Chu Xiu asked, "I heard that you stayed with the barbarian tribes for a period of time. What do you think they want?" "As martial artists, we either pursue power or power. We pursue the world, beauties, and the pinnacle of the path of martial arts. Everyone knows what they want. Then tell me, what do these berserkers want? What do they value?" Kocha was stunned when he heard Chu Xiu's question. This was because Chu Xiu's perspective was very novel. No one had ever asked him this question before, and he had never thought about it that way. Kocha thought about it for a long time and organized his words before he said, "I've never thought about this before. However, in my opinion, most of the barbarians are actually simple-minded and all brawn and no brain. Their daily lives are actually very simple. They eat, sleep, and have children. There doesn't seem to be anything else. They don't seem to think about such complicated things. To them, fighting is not like us, where we pursue the pinnacle of strength. For them, strength is just a way to make a living. At the same time, the strongest warrior in the tribe has the right to choose women first." The corner of Chu Xiu's mouth twitched. Kocha was also a weirdo. His tone was not just looking down on the barbarians. No matter what, he could be considered half a barbarian. Of course, Kocha didn't think that his choice of words was wrong. He continued, "The disputes between these barbarians are quite interesting. Today, you came to my territory to hunt, and you insulted my ancestors. Anyway, it's all just a small matter. If we were to ask what they valued the most, it would be their ancestors and God." "Ancestors and God?" Kocha nodded and said, "The barbarians respect their ancestors, the ones who founded their tribe. They believe that their ancestors obtained the divine oracle and obtained the power to establish their tribe. As for God, the gods they worship are generally all sorts of messy existences. Earth, wind, water, fire, rain, dew, all sorts of ferocious beasts and fierce beasts. In any case, they believe that anything can become a god. However, I have read in the records of the Royal Sky Pavilion that some of the messy gods they worship are not made up. When my ancestors first arrived in the Daoist continent, they had killed many extremely powerful ferocious beasts, as well as all sorts of strange and mysterious existences born from the world. Even martial immortal level experts would have to join hands in order to kill them. It is not strange for these existences to be worshipped as gods by the barbarian tribes. Furthermore, they have also obtained a lot of power from those existences. Thus, the way they see it, their ancestors have given them the continuation of their future, and their gods have bestowed them power. Those two things are what they revere the most, and are existences that they cannot insult the most. Over half of the disputes between the barbarian tribes are caused by such comical things. Chu Xiu nodded, and then asked, "Do you have any detailed information about the barbarian tribes, such as their power system, fighting style, habits, and so on?" Kucha nodded, and said, "Yes, I do. Some of them were recorded by me, and some were obtained from the other anemophilia. In Jianghu County, Kucha was able to establish himself here because of his relationship with the barbarian tribes. He had also put in a lot of effort into the affairs of the barbarian tribes." As Chu Xiu read through the information, Kucha waited at the side, not daring to rush him. It was already midnight when Chu Xiu finished reading through the information. One plan after another appeared in his mind. He suddenly said, "You said that the barbarian tribes are very united when they are invaded by outsiders?" Kucha nodded. "What if they kill each other?" Kucha was taken aback. Then, he shook his head and said, "Lord, are you trying to incite the barbarian tribes to kill each other? The previous prefectural governors of the Imperial Sky Pavilion have tried this before, but it was basically ineffective. The barbarian tribes are simple-minded, but not all of them are idiots. Some of the shamans in their tribes are quite scheming. Moreover, they don't have much ambition or need. In the end, they only managed to incite one or two tribes to kill each other before they were seen through. The instigation of outsiders is basically useless." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "The instigation of outsiders is useless, but what about the instigation from within? Don't they believe in their ancestors and their god? If their god gave them the order, do you think they would believe it?" "God? What god? If there isn't, then I'll just create one." Chu Xiu pointed at himself and said, "If the plan succeeds, I'll be the barbarian tribe's god. I'll be the incarnation of God who walks the world." At this moment, Kucha felt that Chu Xiu had gone mad. Chu Xiu glanced at Kucha and said in a deep voice, "Do you think I've gone mad?" "I dare not," Kucha hastily said. Chu Xiu knocked the table with his hand and said, "Where there's a will, there's a way. How would you know if you don't do it? It might seem like a crazy plan, but if it succeeds, there'll be great benefits. Kucha, I don't know what the barbarian tribe wants, but I know what you want. You have half of the barbarian tribe's bloodline in you. Although this will allow you to do well in Jianghu County, it'll also prevent you from entering the Imperial Sky Pavilion's higher-ups. Since you look down on the barbarian tribe so much, are you looking down on the other half of your bloodline as well?" Kucha's expression turned extremely grim when the scar in his heart was torn open. However, due to Chu Xiu's might, he did not dare to say anything. Chu Xiu continued to say, "You know who I am. I can't stay in Jianghu County forever. However, when I leave, I can still bring someone with me. For example, you. I'm good friends with the Eastern Region's advisor, Lu Sanjin. As long as I speak to him, it'll be easy for him to transfer you to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. Moreover, you should know what the position of the Eastern Region's advisor represents. Lu Sanjin might become the next pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion in the future. At that time, you'll become the pavilion master's direct descendant. Do all of you think that I'm domineering when I kill Sun Xianxia? In reality, I, Chu Xiu, am the most reasonable person in the world. Sun Xianxia was disrespectful to me, so he deserved to die. However, if you're sincere in helping me, I'll give you everything I can in the future." Chu Xiu's words were not tempting at all. It was as though he was placing a bunch of realities in front of Kucha and waiting for him to choose. Actually, at this moment, Chu Xiu was also thinking about Mei Qinglian and his other trusted aides in the lower realm. He had always liked to take risks when doing things. In the lower realm, he had already used more than one or two dangerous plans. If he had mentioned his plan in the lower realm, Mei Qinglian and the others might have been shocked. However, they would have immediately carried it out after they recovered from their shock. They did not believe in Chu Xiu's plan, but they believed in Chu Xiu as a person. As a result, no matter how exaggerated Chu Xiu's plan was, they would still dare to carry it out. There was no need for them to act like this, where they had to make promises and so on. After a while, Kucha gritted his teeth and bowed to Chu Xiu as he said, "You're the prefectural governor. You're my superior. As long as you're willing to do it, I'll naturally do my best." Although he did not say it explicitly, it was clear that he had already decided to be loyal to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "By the way, do you know the barbarian cultivation method? Let me see it. I still need to do a small experiment." Although Kucha did not know what Chu Xiu meant, he still stood up and said, "Those barbarians do not use martial arts. They can't even cultivate internal energy. The entire barbarian race has about two ways of fighting. One is the strange secret arts. I don't know the principles behind these things, but they are in the hands of shamans and priests. Ordinary barbarians do not know them. The other is the power that most barbarians can comprehend. They call it the blessing of their ancestors or the blessing of the gods." As he spoke, Kucha stretched out his hand. Heaven and earth yuan qi gathered in his arm. The power of the earth instantly attached to his arm, causing it to feel as if it weighed 10,000 kilograms. Dispersing the power, Kucha shrugged and said, "This is actually the method of those barbarian warriors. They completely rely on their own affinity with the world to comprehend the power of the world and absorb it into their bodies. That's why they have all sorts of abilities. This is actually a manifestation of the unity of heaven and man realm. However, those fellows definitely do not understand what unity of heaven and man realm is. They prefer to call it the manifestation of their ancestors." Chu Xiu nodded. If that was the case, then it was pretty much what he had planned. Chu Xiu took out a statue and asked Kucha, "I saw a barbarian tribe at the corner of the street. The tattoos on their bodies are similar to this statue. Which barbarian tribe was it?" The statue looked like a Buddha, but not at the same time. It was like a demonic god. It was the statue that recorded the lawful manifestations of heaven and earth mystique. Chapter 11:23. The statue in Chu Xiu's hand contained a magical power called the Law Phenomenon. However, after being purified by the strange demonic energy in Chu Xiu's body, the magical power had already been integrated into Chu Xiu's body. Therefore, the statue was just an ordinary statue. However, because it contained the magical power, the statue was also involuntarily absorbing the world's yuan qi in the surroundings. Although it wasn't much, it could still be regarded as a good treasure. When he was on the street just now, he felt that the totem patterns of a tribe were somewhat similar to the one in his hand. They weren't the same, but they had the same style. Therefore, Chu Xiu also suspected that this statue had something to do with the Daoist people. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that he realized that the barbarian's cultivation method was actually somewhat similar to magical power. It couldn't be recorded in words. Instead, one could only rely on one's own talent to sense the various powers in the world, and then manifest special abilities. This could be said to be the most primitive method of borrowing the power of the world. The same was true for magical power. It was a manifestation of the laws of the world. It could be seen, but not touched. If you knew it, then you knew it, but you couldn't teach it to others. Kocha looked at the statue and thought for a moment before saying, "Sir, you are talking about the Black Net tribe. This tribe is quite famous among the barbarians. They are most famous for all kinds of witchcraft. Is this Black Net tribe a big tribe or a small one?" Kocha thought for a moment and said, "How should I put it? Not big, but not small either. The Black Net tribe has a lot of people. They are not inferior to the big tribes in the depths of the Dilua Mountains. However, their strength is not very strong, and they don't have any powerful warriors. However, the old priest of the Black Net tribe was very terrifying. TSK, that old woman once cursed a mysterious enlightenment-level warrior to death. However, it seems that she was injured because of this, and died not long ago. When that old woman was alive, the Black Net tribe was a big tribe. Now, it's just above average. If it was a big tribe with a lot of resources, they wouldn't be doing business here. Chu Xiu nodded. Not big, not small. That's just right. Chu Xiu took out a black iron mask from the space box. It was the black iron mask of the Blue Dragon Society. This thing had been kept by Chu Xiu for a long time as a souvenir. Chu Xiu carved and engraved on the black iron mask according to the appearance of the statue. After a while, a slightly sinister fiend god mask appeared in Chu Xiu's hand. It was vivid and lifelike, glowing with a black iron luster. Attach a strand of your origin power to it. As long as it has a shocking effect, it will be enough, Chu Xiu said to the inner demon. Heart Demon said with some dissatisfaction, my origin energy is very precious. This is not my main body. Every strand of origin energy that I use is less. My origin power is very precious, it said, my origin power is very precious. Body. Black of Xiu is body. God, said, God. Dragon, demon, Wu Chen, God. God soul Xiu body. Xiu body is, Chen, the inner demon said disdainfully, I've seen through your heart. Why are you still trying to use carrot and stick with me? Although the inner demon said that, it still obediently attached a trace of its original power to the mask. It was precisely because it had seen through Chu Xiu's heart that it knew that Chu Xiu was still very trustworthy when it came to promises made to his own people. The power of the inner demon was very complicated. It didn't target one's mind, but one's heart. So, after the power of the heart demon was attached to the mask, Kocha looked at it, and his entire body seemed to be immersed in it. In the depths of his heart, the 7 emotions and 6 desires were constantly roiling. Only then did he feel that something was wrong. He hurriedly shook his head and looked at the mask with a trace of shock. He had seen it with his own eyes. It was just an ordinary black iron mask, but Chu Xiu had carved it into such a shape, and then it had such power. Could it be that Chu Xiu was also a master refiner? Chu Xiu didn't care about Kocha's thoughts. He called him over and whispered in his ear. Then, he started to move. At the corner of the east street of the Nan'an prefecture, dozens of barbarians of the Black Luo tribe were selling some ferocious beasts they had hunted. A sturdy barbarian man was holding the head of a gigantic single-horned beast that was as tall as a man. He turned his head around and glanced at the other barbarians. He then said with a smile, let's pack up. Today, those outsiders are quite agile. We'll go back to the tribe after we sell the last head of this blazing horn beast. The other clansmen immediately cheered. Compared to the cities built by the outsiders, although they looked very beautiful, they still preferred their own forest. Because the high priest had said that the forest and mountains were the land bestowed to them by God. Those foreigners had cut down the forest and destroyed the mountains. Although they had built tall and magnificent palaces, they had harmed God's gift. They were blaspheming God. Not far from them, a barbarian warrior from another tribe sneered, Tong Bakong, don't wait. Your blazing horn beast's head won't be sold. Those foreigners are very shrewd. They only want the horn of the blazing horn beast. But, your horn has been damaged. It can't be sold. Your high priest is dead. But, you can't even damage the horn of a blazing horn beast. You're really useless. Did your God abandon you? Did your ancestors feel ashamed of you? This barbarian warrior belonged to another tribe. He had some conflicts with the Black Luo tribe before. So, he didn't hesitate to ridicule the Black Luo tribe. Most of the barbarians were simple-minded. They had strong limbs. Simply put, they couldn't control their emotions. A few young men of the Black Luo tribe dashed forward. But, they were stopped by Tong Bakong. He was very angry, but he knew that he and his men were no match for him. At this moment, a 10-year-old child picked up the small bow in his hand with a face full of anger, and shot an arrow at the barbarian warrior. Of course, the result was that the arrow didn't even leave a scratch on the barbarian warrior's armor. But, the barbarian warrior's face turned gloomy. "Your Black Luo tribe dares to attack me?" With that, he picked up a beast fang knife and was about to attack. But, Kocha suddenly appeared and shouted in the barbarian language, "Stop! In Keki, you're also a famous barbarian warrior. Why? Is the knife in your hand used to bully children?" Kocha was very famous among the barbarians. Although everyone knew that he had a close relationship with the foreigners, they didn't know what kind of existence a sect was. They only knew that Kocha was very strong. He wasn't any weaker than the strong barbarian warriors. Moreover, Kocha could bring them many benefits. So, most of the barbarian tribes didn't want to provoke him. Seeing Kocha stop him, Keki snorted coldly and said, "Next time, you'd better pray to God and be as lucky as you are today." Seeing Keki leave, Tong Bakong breathed a sigh of relief. He said to Kocha, "Brother Kocha, thank you for your help. Keki is like a dog in the jungle. He usually follows behind ferocious beasts and doesn't dare to show his face. Only when the ferocious beasts grow old will he dare to bare his teeth and show his power." Kocha shook his head and said, "I didn't want to help you." Tong Bakong asked in surprise, "Then who is it?" Kocha forced himself to calm down and said in a deep voice, "It's the true God of our tribe. The only true God." Among the barbarians, some worshipped the fire god, some worshipped the thunder god, and some worshipped the tiger god and the cat god. But, there was no such thing as a true god. So, Tong Bakong was stunned. Kocha pointed to the end of the long street. Chu Xiu was wearing a black robe. His whole body was shrouded in an extremely mysterious aura. After the fierce battle with Moriha, Chu Xiu's control of his mental power had become stronger than before. Using his mental power to guide the world would form a strange force field, giving people a very mysterious feeling. Foreigners. Tong Bakong and the warriors of the Black Luo tribe behind him all looked at them with hostility and vigilance. All the barbarians looked at these foreigners who had invaded their homeland with hostility. Even if they wanted to reconcile, it was useless. Just like the previous governor of Jianghu County. Even if he adopted a policy of appeasing the barbarians, he still died in the barbarian rebellion. "You, an outsider, will be kind enough to come and save us?" The blue eagle didn't drop the meat in the sky to give alms to the small beasts in the jungle, but to catch more prey. Chu Xiu put on his modified mask, which immediately shocked Tong Bakong and the others. That mask, why did it look so much like the mountain god that their Black Luo tribe worshipped? The mask seemed to have a magical power, making them involuntarily fall into it. A faint voice rose in their minds, "Foreigners? In the eyes of God, there are only his people, there are no internal or external tribes. The fortune of your Black Luo tribe was exchanged for by your deceased ancestors with a great price. Are you sure you want to discard it?" Chu Xiu didn't know the barbarian language. Moreover, the language of each barbarian tribe was different. It was very difficult for outsiders to learn it. Therefore, the simplest way was to use mental power to express one's meaning. Of course, the prerequisite was that the opponent's strength was much lower than yours, or that the opponent didn't resist. Otherwise, it would become a battle of mental power. Tong Bakong didn't know what fortune meant, but at this moment, his mind had already fallen into a very strange state, and his vigilance seemed to have disappeared. Hearing this, he hurriedly said, "No. Of course not. Then take me to your tribe and see the person who can really make decisions in your tribe." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Tong Bakong nodded obediently and directly brought Chu Xiu to the depths of Nanman. Ku Cha, who was at the side, gritted his teeth and also followed behind Chu Xiu. However, he knew what Chu Xiu wanted to do. If Chu Xiu was seen through, the entire Black Luo tribe would go all out against them. They might even gather the other barbarian tribes. It was unknown whether they could walk out of the southern barbarian tribe. But now that it had come to this, there was no turning back, and he could only follow Chu Xiu's gamble. Chapter 11:24. There weren't many paths in the forest. Tong Bakong and the others had to make their way through the forest that didn't have any road signs at all. They walked at an extremely fast speed for close to a day before they arrived at a gathering place of the barbarian tribe. The so-called Black Luo tribe was actually a simple tent made of wood. It had a very strong primitive aura. The surrounding fences were the city walls. The strangest thing was that there was a pair of pitch-black cheetahs at the entrance of the Black Civ tribe. However, the cheetahs were incomparably huge. They were as huge as elephants and emitted a ferocious aura. Tong Bakong only reacted when they arrived at the entrance of the Black Luo tribe. What had he done? He had actually brought an outsider to his tribe. What was he thinking? Before Tong Bakong could react, a clear and bright voice was heard. How was the harvest this time? Did those cunning foreigners deceive you during the transaction? A brawny man with flame-like patterns on his face appeared in front of the entrance. His aura was extremely strong. The ground trembled with every step he took. It was as if he was a giant beast. However, his expression changed when he saw Chu Xiu and Ku Cha. He recognized Ku Cha. It was normal for Ku Cha to come here. However, this masked guy looked very strange. However, he could tell from his aura that he was definitely an outsider. Ku Cha transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu as fast as he could. He is the chief of the Black Luo tribe, He Jie. After the death of the Black Luo tribe's high priest, he became the strongest expert of the Black Luo tribe. It's hard to say how strong this guy is. He doesn't have the battle record of killing a heaven and earth mystic enlightenment realm expert like the Black Luo tribe's high priest. However, many true fire spirit refinement realm experts have died in his hands. I couldn't even take 3 of his moves. Tong Bakong. What the hell are you doing? Why did you bring an outsider to the tribe? He Jie shouted. His voice was like a thunderclap. Tong Bakong stuttered. Previously, when Inkeki came looking for trouble with me, it was Kecha. No, it was this outsider who saved me. He even said that he brought the ancestors' fortune with him, that he was a true god or something. Just believe what he says. Before Tong Bakong could finish speaking, he was interrupted by He Jie. At this time, Chu Xiu said lightly, "You don't have to be so excited, chief. I've said it before, I came with the will of the true God to give your Black Civ tribe a great fortune. This great fortune was obtained by the ancestors of your Black Civ tribe at a great cost. Whether you want it or not is entirely up to you." Hearing the voice in his head, He Jie's face changed. Regardless of whether this outsider was real or fake, just his mental strength alone was incomparably strong, to the extent that it could ignore his mental defense. Wait a minute, I'm not good at this kind of thing. Go get the priest. Korcha was stunned. Wasn't the Black Civ tribe's shaman already dead? When did another priest appear? After a while, the people of the Black Civ tribe actually brought a young woman with them. The young woman was tall and slender. Although she was wearing a black robe, it was difficult to hide her curvaceous figure. Moreover, although her skin was as dark as an ordinary barbarian's, her facial features were three-dimensional and exquisite. She didn't have as many tattoos as the other barbarians, but there was a star between her eyebrows. Even if this woman's appearance was placed in the outside world, she would definitely be considered a beauty. Korcha understood and said, "So it's Green Jade." She was the personal disciple of the previous high priest and also the successor. Now that the previous high priest is dead, she indeed has the qualifications to become the high priest. Seeing Green Jade coming over, He Jia said in a deep voice, "Green Jade." "No, High Priest, can you see if this guy is real or fake?" Green Jade glanced at Chu Xiu and directly shouted in a low voice, "Of course he's fake. My tribe only worships the mountain god, how can there be a true god? Outsider, you have blasphemed my Black Civ tribe's ancestors, blasphemed my Black Civ tribe's god. No matter who you are, you will die here today. Your flesh will be eaten by vultures, and your bones will be torn apart by dogs." Korcha, who was following behind Chu Xiu, was already regretting his decision. If he had known that this would happen, he wouldn't have accompanied Chu Xiu to play tricks here. Now, not only had he failed to pretend to be a god, but he had also become a ghost. Just as the Black Civ tribe's martialists were about to attack Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Mountain god? Those are all fake gods. There is only one true god in this world." Green Jade's expression changed abruptly. She waved her hand and signaled for the others to stop. She also used her mind power to transmit her voice. However, the fluctuation of her mind power contained a violent emotion. "What did you say? Did you say that my tribe worships a fake god?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Of course it's a fake god. A true god is omnipotent. He is also your true creator. Have you never thought about where you came from?" His powerful mind power spread out, allowing all the Black Civ tribe's members to sense Chu Xiu's intentions. Therefore, the Black Civ tribe's members were all dumbfounded. Where did they come from? The barbarian tribe's thinking was simple. Moreover, they didn't have the habit of recording historical records. How would they know where they came from? Everyone subconsciously turned their gaze to Green Jade. The status of a priest was very high in all the barbarian tribes. Sometimes, it was even higher than the tribe leader, just like the Black Civ tribe's previous priest. The priest represented knowledge. He was the most knowledgeable person in the entire tribe. However, Green Jade's expression was the same. Her master had never taught her where her tribe had come from. "Then tell me, where did our tribe come from?" Chu Xiu was wearing a mask. However, his eyes were like a whirlpool that was twisting. Anyone who looked at him would involuntarily get sucked into it. Chu Xiu said in a soothing voice, "Humans, be it the barbarian tribe or the Daoist human tribe, were all created by God. This world was originally like a primordial egg. When God split the world open, the earth became beneath his feet, and the sky became above his head." Chu Xiu stretched out his hand, and a spot of light condensed. God said, "Let there be light," so there was light. God said, "Where there is light, there must be darkness." The light quickly dimmed and condensed into a spot of endless darkness. God said, "There should be earth, wind, water, and fire in this world." Suddenly, the essence of heaven and earth quickly turned into earth, wind, water, and fire, changing between Chu Xiu's fingers. God said, "There should be life in this world," so there were all kinds of plants and beasts. Kucha stared dumbfounded at Chu Xiu, who had a solemn expression on his face. If he hadn't seen Chu Xiu kill without batting an eye, he would have suspected that Chu Xiu was really the incarnation of God in this world. Even Green Jade looked at Chu Xiu and couldn't help but ask, "What about us? How did we appear?" Chu Xiu's voice was deep and resonated in everyone's heart, giving off a very sacred and solemn feeling. Humans are the most familiar existences among all living things in the world. God turned the blood on his forehead into the humans of exalted heaven and let them live in the sky. That's why they know more than you do. God also turned the blood on his palm into you, so your bodies are naturally stronger than theirs. Even children can tear tigers and leopards apart. God created all things and is omnipotent. The things you worship are only the first batch of creatures created by God, so they have great power. But what can they do? How can they be called God? Chu Xiu's rambling like a cult leader was indeed very funny in the eyes of outsiders. But in the eyes of the people of Black Luo tribe, it was incomparably real, even more real than when their high priest led them to worship the mountain god. As for the people of Jianghu, except for a few sects like the Sanskrit sect and the heavenly Luo temple, most of the people of Jianghu didn't believe in the existence of gods and Buddhas in this world. To be more precise, there might have been gods and Buddhas in the distant ancient times. But now, they might have gone somewhere else, or they might have perished together with the devil gods in the ancient legends. Anyway, they definitely didn't exist now. But these barbarian tribes believed in God. They believed that God had always been protecting them, and they also believed that the spirits of their deceased ancestors were worshipped beside God and were also protecting them. So now, Chu Xiu's rambling was very real in their eyes. After all, they had only offered some fierce beast meat before, and the priest had led them to recite some blessings of the mountain god. It was very simple and crude. How could they be like Chu Xiu, who clearly explained the power of God and the origin of this world in a reasonable and well-grounded manner? The scene of heaven and earth being separated, with light and darkness, was extremely sacred and magnificent in their imagination. The power brought by thousands of years of religion in his previous life wasn't something that these barbarians, who only knew how to pray crudely, could understand. Even Green Jade, who was the most clear-headed among these barbarians, almost couldn't help but believe it. After all, no one had ever talked about these things before. She also didn't believe that it was made up by those foreigners. But she still couldn't help asking, then who are you? Are you the real God? Chu Xiu shook his head, then nodded and said, a drop of God's blood can transform into a race, so God is everywhere. As long as God wills it, I will naturally know what I should do. So you can think of me as the incarnation of God's will, and God's messenger. The ancestor of your Black Luo tribe didn't have it easy. He was worshipped by God's side and made great contributions. His spirit almost dissipated in exchange for this good fortune. I hope you can cherish it. Green Jade said with a trace of doubt, but why do we think that what you said is true? A mysterious smile appeared at the corner of Chu Xiu's mouth. He said, when I give you God's gift, you will know whether it's true or not. Chapter 11:25. Seeing Chu Xiu trying to play tricks on the Black Net tribe, Korcha broke out in a cold sweat. It was true that these barbarians were simple-minded, and they believed in the existence of God and their ancestors. However, simple-mindedness didn't mean they were stupid. They couldn't possibly believe that you were God's messenger just because you said you were. Even if Chu Xiu talked extravagantly, as long as he didn't show them something real, they definitely wouldn't believe him. Perhaps some ordinary barbarians would be tempted by mental strength and subconsciously believe Chu Xiu. However, barbarians like He Jia and Green Jade, who had a certain status in the barbarian tribe, even if they were simple-minded, would still have their own thoughts. They wouldn't easily believe others. Green Jade still had a trace of vigilance as she looked at Chu Xiu. Gift? What gift? Chu Xiu said indifferently, the power of your tribe is bestowed by God, allowing you to obtain power from the heavens and earth. That gift is naturally for you to obtain greater power. Which one of you wants to give it a try? Green Jade and He Jia looked at each other. He Jia said, I'm the tribe leader. I'll go first. In a tribe, sometimes the most important person wasn't the tribe leader, but the priest. The tribe leader was the most prestigious warrior, while the priest was the key to the survival of the tribe. At this time, Tong Bakong, who had previously led the way for Chu Xiu, suddenly stood up and said, Tribe leader, I brought them here. Whether they are real or fake, let me do it. The warriors of the Black Net tribe need to be responsible. This is what the previous tribe leader taught me. Chu Xiu said indifferently, don't worry. There won't be any danger with a gift from God. Although Chu Xiu said so, Tong Bakong still felt apprehensive. He hadn't forgotten the scene of him being bewitched. In any case, his subconscious told him that God shouldn't use such methods. A gold-and-silver flame appeared in Chu Xiu's hand. It was actually the inner force true fire. Now, feel the temperature of this divine fire. This is a gift from God. Tong Bakong subconsciously touched the fire with his hand, but in an instant, he felt an intense pain that penetrated deep into his bones, causing him to let out a blood-curdling scream. He Jia and Green Jade's expressions changed. They wanted to stop him, but they heard Chu Xiu say, "Focus. Remember this feeling. The power that God has given you is not something that you can only use when you need it. You have to integrate it into your body, into every drop of your blood, into every piece of bone." As Chu Xiu's voice rang out, Tong Bakong was still howling in pain. However, the strands of world energy seeped into his body and gradually fused with it, causing his body to swell and his aura to continuously strengthen. This scene caused everyone's eyes to widen, including Korcha. Tong Bakong was an old warrior of the He Luo tribe. He still had some strength, but it wasn't strong. In addition, he was a little old, so he could only fight with the real pellet state martial artists. But now, his aura was close to the powerful warriors in the tribe, enough to be on par with the real fire spirit refinement realm martial artists. This scene had the greatest impact on Kecha. This was because he knew that it was impossible for the barbarian tribe to learn the cultivation methods of the human tribe, and they were also unable to absorb the true qi or inner strength of the human tribe. But now, Chu Xiu had actually forcefully increased the strength of a barbarian tribe warrior. Just how had he done it? In fact, Chu Xiu's method was very simple. He just slightly modified the real fire spirit refinement technique and used it on these barbarians. Previously, Chu Xiu had asked Kecha to find information about the barbarians and had asked him to demonstrate the power of the barbarians on the spot. In truth, he had only wanted to test what the so-called martial arts of the barbarians were like. In fact, in the information, the description of the barbarians' power was already very comprehensive. After all, the people of the mortal world had been here for tens of thousands of years, and the research was very thorough. The reason why the barbarians couldn't practice the martial arts of the human race was actually very simple. It was because they didn't know what martial arts was. Martial arts was a very complicated thing. The flesh, blood, meridians, internal strength, dantian, including one's own understanding of heaven and earth, 3 flowers gathering above one's head, 5 qi gathering, and so on. This was an extremely complicated system. So whether it was learning martial arts as a child or as an adult, one needed to understand the entire system and the cultural heritage of the human race. However, this group of barbarians didn't understand the language, so they might not be able to learn it for a lifetime. Unless it was like Korcha, although he had half barbarian blood in his body, he grew up on the side of the human race. The education he received was the same as most of the martial artists, so he could have his current cultivation. Of course, the barbarians also had their own strength, which depended entirely on talent. Most of the barbarians had extremely amazing physical strength, and children could tear tigers and leopards apart. As for the adult barbarian warriors, if they had better talent, they could sense the power of heaven and earth and subconsciously draw it over, borrowing a part of that power. It was very similar to the martial artists at the unity of heaven and man realm. So the barbarian warriors who could reach this step were all at the unity of heaven and man realm. The only difference was that they could only stay in this realm for a lifetime, and their own strength was many times greater than that of the martial artists at the unity of heaven and man realm. However, the barbarians didn't know how to control this power at all. They could only use their instincts to borrow this power, and after using it, the power would dissipate into the world. Although there would still be a trace of power left in their body, it was very small and wouldn't have much effect. Now, Chu Xiu's method was very simple and crude. In fact, it was to let them experience the feeling of refining their body with true fire, and then forcefully draw in the power of heaven and earth and violently stuff it into their body. As long as they could withstand it, then this power would be theirs. The principle was similar to refining their body with true fire. Feeling that Tong Bakong was about to reach his limit, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Enough. You can't withstand too much of the power that belongs to gods." Tong Bakong collapsed on the ground, but his current state could be said to have surpassed the peak of his youth. Even his slightly old face had become a little younger. Tong Bakong clenched his fists, and a layer of flame suddenly curled around it. He punched the ground, and instantly, a crater of several dozen feet appeared on the ground. Like an earth dragon flipping over, cracks appeared on the ground, trees collapsed, and tents were torn apart. "This is my power?" Tong Bakong looked at his own hands in disbelief. He Jie's mouth twitched as he said, "You were responsible for filling the ground, and you were responsible for the collapsed tents. Do you feel anything wrong now?" Tong Bakong shook his head and said, "Apart from feeling a little tired and a little pain, there's nothing wrong. Instead, I feel full of power. I just need to rest for a while." Upon hearing this, the people of the Black Net tribe looked at Chu Xiu. This time, it was as if they were looking at a god. For so many years, the barbarians had tried to learn the cultivation methods of the human race. In the end, they had snatched the ancient books, but they couldn't understand them. They had even kidnapped human warriors, but they couldn't understand what they were saying. It wasn't easy to find a translator, but in the end, they still couldn't understand what they were saying, so in the end, they gave up. Chu Xiu was the first person who could directly give them power without saying any nonsense. If this wasn't a miracle, then what was? He Jia and Green Jade looked at each other. Even they couldn't help but believe it now. After all, for so many years, no one had been able to give the barbarians such great power. Even some of the more knowledgeable barbarians who wanted to promote the human race's cultivation methods couldn't do it. All these years, the only thing they had learned was to use the various armors and weapons made by the human race. After all, it didn't take much effort to learn. This person in front of them had only used an instant to give them such great power. If this wasn't a miracle, then what could it be? Of course, Chu Xiu didn't tell them that as long as there were smart people who could remember the feeling of refining their bodies with true fire, as long as they could endure the pain, the power would continue to accumulate. It was just that it wouldn't be as obvious as the first time. He Jie's attitude subconsciously became respectful. He asked carefully, "Why does Tong Bakong feel so much pain?" Chu Xiu looked at him and said indifferently, "This is the power of a god. How can a mortal bear the power of a god without paying a price? Why, you can't even endure this little bit of pain." He Jia hurriedly said, "How is that possible? The warriors of my Black Civ tribe wouldn't even blink if their flesh and blood were eaten by metal-eating ants." As he said this, He Jia gave Green Jade a meaningful look. Green Jade quietly walked over to Tong Batsong's side. Her hand blossomed with a dark green light, which seeped into Tong Batsong's body. Chu Xiu could feel that the power contained a natural spiritual power, as well as a wisp of emu vitality. It seemed that these so-called high priests of the barbarian tribe were experts in spiritual power, and not in physical combat. Green Jade nodded at He Jia, indicating that Tong Bakong was fine. As a high priest and a tribe leader, they had dealt with the Daoist warriors many times. They knew that the Daoist warriors' methods were strange. They had many secret techniques that could overdraft one's lifespan in exchange for power. They were afraid that Chu Xiu would use such a technique to deceive them. But now, it seemed that not only was Tong Bakong fine, his vitality was even stronger than before. He Jia felt relieved. He nodded, touched his forehead, and said to Chu Xiu, "Sir Divine Envoy, Black Civ Tribe's Patriarch He Jia requests Sir Divine Envoy's gift." Chu Xiu nodded and placed a clump of inner qi true fire in front of He Jia. After coming into contact with the inner qi true fire, He Jia only let out a muffled groan and then no longer made a sound. This caused Chu Xiu to be stunned. This guy was truly a tough guy. Chu Xiu knew the pain of refining one's body with internal strength true fire. Every drop of blood in one's body was being roasted. Not many people could endure this kind of pain. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.